The Egypt Code not only develops a pyramid stars correlation, but also reveals an amazing grand unified plan which involves the extraordinary temples of Upper Egypt. Quite a program tonight, the Egypt Code with Robert Bauval, next on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. I'm George Norrie. Robert Bauval, of course, is out there and somewhere beyond, and we're having some technical difficulties getting a hold of him. His phone line just went dead, ladies and gentlemen. So we're going to continue playing a portion of Coast to Coast for you, and if we can get him back, we will put him right on for you. Well, we didn't have to go listen to a past program after all, because through the magic of science, we're able to get a hold of Robert Bauval, and he's locked back in now. Robert Bauval, born, of course, in Egypt in 1948. In 1989, he published a study which proposed that the layout of the three Giza pyramids and their relative position to the Nile was intended to mirror the layout of the three stars in Orion's belt and their relative position to the Milky Way. This thesis, now known as the Orion correlation theory, became the subject of his first book, The Orion Mystery. Bauval is presently working on a new book, Sirius Rising, which will track the influence of the Egyptian star goddess Sirius from prehistoric times to the early Christian era as well, with special focus on her role in the rebirth cult and temple rituals and alignments. We're talking tonight about the Egypt Code. Robert Bauval. Robert, welcome back to the program. Been many years.
Thank you. Yes, it has been quite a few years. If I recall well, it must have been 96.
And maybe a little bit in 2000 or so, too, as well. 2002, I think.
You're absolutely right. I had an interview down the line. You're absolutely right, yes.
Great work with the Egypt Code, but let's go back to the Orion Mystery and bring us up to speed on that theory and why and how you got that theory.
Right. Well, for me, it all began a while ago in 1983. At that time, I was minding my own business, really, as an engineer, and I was working in Saudi Arabia, in Riyadh, in the capital city of Riyadh. And at that time, my mother still lived in Egypt, as you rightly said in the introduction. I was born in Egypt, in Alexandria, and my family still lived there. So I went to visit my mother. Really, my interest in Egyptology and pyramids was very average. I mean, I was interested, but I had no particular direction in that study. But anyway, there I go on a short trip, and I went to visit by myself the Cairo Museum. And at that time, it was we're talking about the early 80s. It was a bit chaotic. You could enter with cameras and videos, and nobody minded. These days, it's a bit more difficult. But anyway, I went in there, and I had an old Olympus camera, long before the digital cameras, and I had a black and white film in my camera, and I was wandering around, and I saw a picture on the wall taken by the British Air Force of the pyramids. And the picture was taken directly overhead. And oddly enough, this was the first time, although I had looked at maps before, but it's the first time that my attention was caught by the fact that the three pyramids appear on a diagonal line. There's two large pyramids, the pyramid of Cheops and the pyramids of Khafra, whereas the third pyramid was much smaller and was offset from this diagonal. And it's one of those moments in my life where I popped the right question. I said, why is it so? And it stuck in my mind. And so I returned to... Hello?
Yeah, I'm with you.
I returned to Saudi Arabia with this thought in mind, and again, coincidence would have it that a friend of mine had also been on a trip to Egypt and had brought a coffee book table with a few pictures, and one of the pictures was the pyramid texts taken in a pyramid in Saqqara. And there was a statement from the pyramid text saying the king wanted to go to the stars after his death, and it mentioned the constellation of Orion.
Mm-hmm.
So with these two thoughts in mind, unconsciously, a process started brewing in my mind. And on one very special night, where my life changed from an engineer to whatever I am now, I was with...
Well, phone just went out again. Yeah, we're having some incredible problems trying to get Robert Buvall. Well, imagine this. You're sitting at home. You're ready to have a late-night dinner. You want to sit back and relax. It's a Sunday into Monday. And a producer from Coast to Coast AM calls you and says, "We need you to go on." Richard C. Hoagland is next with me in just a moment on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. We're not going to have the interview with Robert Buvall tonight. His phone lines are just either clipping out or they're just too bad. However, you know, there's always the wonder of favorite guests here on Coast to Coast. And, you know, almost like a baseball coach, when you're in the eighth inning and you've got to bring in your top relief pitcher to get everybody out of the game, who do you call? Well, you call Richard C. Hoagland. Hey, Richard, how are you?
George, you're going to owe me one for this.
I know that. I bet you were comfortable, you were eating, you were ready to go to sleep, and probably listening to Coast in bed. And
I didn't even get to the part where Robin showed me this really interesting new green thing she was going to wear tonight.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. And I know how you love to prepare for a show.
I like preparation, yes.
But this time, we're going to dance together, Richard. Hey,
okay,
lots going on out there. But I don't know if you saw the story about Saturn today, that they have found some partial rings.
Yeah, ring arcs like we found with Voyager about 30-some years ago at Neptune.
It is amazing to me, Richard, how they continue to find these new things out there.
Well, you've got a spacecraft the size of a Greyhound bus, unmanned, of course, with lots of cool robots and instruments and cameras and all that. You got plenty of fuel. You're in space where technology lives forever. I mean, you know, there are spacecraft orbiting the sun still relaying data to NASA and JPL that were launched over 40 years ago.
That's right. They're still functioning.
They're still, you know, so, I mean, there was a really nasty pre-Gloria Steinem joke that was, you know, told around the Hughes Aircraft Company, which built a lot of the early communication satellites.
Yes.
And it went something like, the engineer said, well, once you get them into space and out of the way of women's hands, they work fine. This was a 1950s engineer at Hughes.
That's right, exactly.
Yeah,
they didn't quite understand.
Different day, different time, different era, different politics.
So true.
Yeah, Sarah, don't get mad at me.
So true. And now the Chinese, they're going to launch again?
Chinese are launching again. They're coming up on their annual anniversary. So, of course, what they're doing is building through these launches a step-by-step compressed timeline like we did in terms of going to the moon with Mercury and then Gemini and then Apollo, except they've got a much more capable spacecraft. It's a kind of a modified Soyuz that they bought from the Russians and then added to, redesigned, whatever. And remember you and I did a show several years ago when they launched their first taikonaut?
Yes.
Chinese for astronaut. And I said that they could take that to the moon at any moment.
Yes. We were baffled at least I was, maybe you already knew, at how fast with the latest technology you can go. You know, here we are, we land on the moon in 1969, yet they can do it in just a few short years of being in space and learning space. Technologically, it seems like the leap is huge now.
Well, look, history compresses, particularly when you're dealing with follow-on civilizations that do the same thing that a predecessor did. I mean, we did not keep secret how we did Apollo. And building rockets, I mean, remember, the Chinese invented rockets, according to the contemporary history.
That's right.
So the idea that they could compress the development